Hi everyone, good afternoon. We'll wait a few more minutes. All speakers are here, but we'll still wait a bit more from the audience. So if that's okay with you, we'll give 2 more minutes and then we'll start for our second panel of the day around transparency. Those who just joined, just so you know, we're waiting for 1 or 2 more minutes. The speakers are here, but we're waiting for everyone to be here from the audience. We're comfortably sit on the boat or at home, depending. But we're fine waiting to start in 1 minute. Okay, so cautious of time, I think we can start. I don't know exactly how many people joined already. I don't actually see that, but I think we can start to be sure that we have time for the debate. So thanks all for joining this Summer at Tech virtual event. I'm Pironon and I'm Chief Programmatic Officer at Smart. Transparency is everywhere. Overall, as you all see, there is an increased need for transparency everywhere in our world. Consumers want transparency over what they eat, over what they buy. Users want transparency over what is done with their data. People want more transparency across the board. In our industry, there is also this growing need for transparency. Indeed, as digital ad spend has grown massively, and as there is an increased complexity somehow in the value chain, PwC produced an in-depth analysis named Programmatic Supply Chain Transparency, which goal is to know exactly where the money is going from the start to the end point. So there are many intermediaries. It's not always easy to know exactly what is bringing each one and where the money is going. So that's why before presenting you all our speakers and having a conversation with them around transparency, as an introduction, I would like you to welcome Sam Tomlinson, who actually produced for PwC this study I was mentioning, and he will give us a quick snapshot on this study. So Sam, I let you start with this introduction.
Thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Sam Tomlinson, partner at PwC. I'm sure many of you will have seen the headlines generated by our study, but I think it's still worth me giving a quick recap on what we did and the key findings. So we worked with 15 premium advertisers who were represented by 8 agency groups, and we worked with 12 premium publishers. And we took the programmatic buy-side data from those 15 advertisers and the programmatic revenues from the 12 premium publishers. And we joined those impressions up from end to end to establish a picture of what was happening in those supply chains, right the way from advertiser through agency, through DSP, through SSP to publisher. A lot of the headlines have focused around the unknown delta, which I will come back to in a second. But actually the unknown delta was of secondary importance. The most critical finding from the study is the 9 months that it took us to secure data access And then when we did, the variable quality of much of that data. Just to put both those items into some sort of context, back last June, advertisers, agencies, and publishers were all signed up and wanted to share their data. But the complex permissioning and repermissioning required meant that it took 9 months for us to actually get that data. And individually, each component of the supply chain was behaving rationally, but you end up with a systemically irrational result when it takes 9 months to people to share access to data that fundamentally should belong to the end buyer and the end seller. Once you had that data, the inconsistencies and the mixes of data definitions, data taxonomies, the fact there's no unique transaction ID that enables you to automatically match buy side to sell side, the fact that some tech vendors find it much harder than others to filter and share log level data. All of those factors meant we were only able to match 12% of impressions within our study universe being the 15 advertisers, the 12 publishers for 3 months in the UK. And we could only match 12%. That 12% was still 31 million, which is a big number. But in the context of programmatic, 31 million is tiny. And we have been challenged a lot on how our study can be representative. So just to be clear, we have never claimed our study is representative. We actively think it is not representative. It was a premium study by its nature, focused on premium advertisers, premium publishers. Within that world, we could only match the 12% of impressions with the best data quality. So we're very confident in our findings for those 31 million matched impressions. We're also pretty confident that this would not be representative of longer tail programmatic. Finally, of course, we have the 15% of unattributable spend, the unknown delta. My own best guess is that that represents half a dozen different causes, each contributing 1 or 2 or 3%, and that's how we aggregate to the delta. The only way to know for sure will be to resolve the challenges around data access, resolve the challenges around data quality, after which you can then properly explore that delta and drive it down for the benefit of all participants in the industry. David, I think you might be on mute.
Not sure it's only me or if there is an issue. I lost the others.
I can still hear you fine.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, great. In this context, we all understand it's getting kind of honey goes, and it's becoming more and more important for everyone in the value chain to understand where the money is going, to be able to report on this. So in a word, we need more transparency. So the goal of this panel is to see where we stand with regards to theory and then to practice. So welcome 4 guests: Carlotta from Vodafone, so as an advertiser, of course; Cadi from Beeswax, the DSP; Luc from 366, a publisher; and Pubstack, Loïc from Pubstack, a tech company. So first topic will be around transparency and trackability. Where do we stand with regards to theory? So first, I will be interested in, maybe first slide, I would be interested in having for each of you, it will be a roundtable, your definition of transparency, what it means for you, considering that you each have a different role in the value chain, why it's important to your clients or partners, and what about legal, regulatory reasons. So if you could each have an in-depth answer for that, would be great. So maybe you can, if you can start, please.
David, I think
I can't hear you well. So
yeah, what turn it is? Who is in charge to talk now? Actually, I didn't hear the name.
Cadi will start on the left.
Perfect.
From left.
okay.
That's okay.
Hopefully everyone can hear me. And so I think, David, it's a really great question because transparency can be different based on different people's needs. I think the key thing for me when I'm thinking about transparency is really thinking about making sure that there is alignment. The brand should have complete alignment with all of the partners that they are working with. And that means knowing exactly who you are paying to do what within your programmatic stack. At Beeswax, we don't bill on a percentage of media model. We bill based on the volume of processing that we are doing for our customers. And that's quite a different approach, but it means that our customers know that the costs that they're paying to us are based on the costs that we are executing for them. So we're not penalizing them if they want to buy more expensive or higher quality media. And so I think for me, that transparency around fixed cost and that transparency around absolute alignment is really crucial for brands to drive a successful campaign. I think with everyone muted, shall I, Carlotta, can I hand to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm completely online with you because for me as an advertiser, I think that transparency is a key driver that will permit to Programmatic to be more valuable in the complex of media ecosystem. And I really want the transparency, and I really think it's the most important thing for us, because I really want to know exactly the value of what I buy as an advertiser. So for me, it's to have also the control about my investment in media.
It's Luke, so...
Thanks, Carlotta. Yeah, sorry, I had a connection issue, I guess. Sorry for that. Luke, maybe you can move on for the publisher.
Yes, on the sales side, the idea is the same. Just for the business, it's only the way to know who is doing what and the value they bring. So transparency, I don't know, it's a good word, but the idea is to know exactly what we are selling. And when we see the advertisers to say, hey, I want to sell 100 euros, I have to know what is behind the 100 euros and I have to manage it. So the idea is to work only with people who disclose not exactly what they are doing and the way they are doing, but the cost it has and the value they bring. Transparency is to manage the partners we work with and the value they bring to the value chain. I think it's the key point for us on the sell side.
And then I guess
I'll
probably point out one of the main limitations of our study. So our study was designed as much as possible to show what was being done in terms of where the money went. But our study had a major limitation in that it didn't focus in on what was being delivered in return. So to the previous point that was made, true transparency is what's being done and why. Our study was a step in that it looked at elements of financial transparency, but actually the really important question is what's the value that's being delivered? I think if you have proper insight into the value of the services being delivered, then that is obviously every bit as important as the financial transparency of how much it's costing.
Should I go next? David?
Thanks, Sam. Loïc, so sorry, as I was cut for some time, not sure that you also had time to give your...
So exactly like Luc, I will talk from a publisher perspective, because our end users and customers are publishers. So this is the part of the value chain I'm the most familiar with. So the first thing, I will also talk especially about what kind of transparency publishers are expecting from the programmatic platforms they are working with, SSPs, ad server, header bidders, ad networks, TSP, etc. Right now, I feel like transparency is a kind of fuzzy word in the industry. It's really hard to define it. It's a buzzword, very fancy one, and it's really hard to define it exactly what is transparency. So I would try to make a breakdown across two different meanings for me. The first one is the operational transparency. This is what Luc mentioned. What piece of inventory a partner is buying, to whom it is sold, which DSP, which trading desk, which intermediary, which reseller, what campaign, what is the buyer buying exactly across the SSP. All this question, which is operational transparency, basically, what the SSP or the partner is doing with my inventory. And the second step, that is of course only enabled if operational transparency is there, is the financial transparency. What are the tech fees, the margin, what are the margin on a specific advertising campaign? So for financial transparency, you need operational transparency actually. And financial transparency is enabled if there is operational transparency. But if you don't know what your partner is doing on your inventory, you can already know about the financial transparency. Once you know what a platform is doing on your inventory, then you can control things. And in my opinion, this is the end goal for a publisher, to have the transparency. The end goal is to control things and to make the right decision, to block an advertiser that is not fitting your inventory, to block eventually, to define a floor price for a specific campaign, etc., etc. So 3 stages, in my opinion: operational transparency, operational plus financial transparency, and the final goal is control over the buying process, basically. So this is my view about transparency.
Okay, thanks all for the detailed answer. And actually the next, but what is important is to know on what you actually expect transparency for yourself, considering your position in the value chain. Where do you actually miss transparency from others? Is it on log level data? Is it on fee? Is it on another topic? So if you can as well each answer on that one, but maybe a quicker answer.
Okay, my connection probably is very low because I listen you, but with some interruption. Well, from an advertiser perspective, at the moment we have a pretty good transparency about media agency fees, set up campaigns, optimization, that probably some years ago you don't have it. But we are still a little bit far away about the using of log level data and above all to understand all and see all the log level data and use to drive our strategy.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Carlotta. Cadi, if you can.
Yes, I think from our side, we often work with brands. We increasingly hear it from agencies as well, that receiving these log level data files can be really tricky, because even if you're just talking about win logs, Sam made this point earlier, but the huge volumes of data that we're talking about can be quite tricky, especially if the brand is having to receive these, normalize these, process these themselves. And so we've made a big push to make it much easier to access log level data. So providing solutions where that log level data is hosted by us can be queried in real time with SQL, so it's readily accessible, but just trying to remove some of those barriers to accessing the data, because I think if everyone would like the data, but not everyone is perhaps set up to process it in the most smooth way. Sounds like it was something that came up with you.
Yeah, no, it's right. I mean, we see many agencies indeed not really able to actually manage all these data and not really able to extract the real value from it, for sure. Yeah, thanks, Cadi. Someone else on this topic? Luc, maybe you want to comment on that?
Oh, I don't know if I have to comment. Just in the advertising market, we used to solve or to propose to solve some basic problems with very technical and very intelligent solutions. Maybe we could try to learn first and to solve problems with the adapted solution. Low-level, yes, it's very interesting, but we have to manage it. We have to be able to get the good interpretation and the good deeper interpretation. Sometimes it's quite much more simple than that. So maybe we should learn to get the good solution to the good problem. And sometimes the simpler it is, the more efficient it is.
Indeed. Maybe just to accelerate a bit, we can go directly to the next question, since in question 1 we've already tackled already some topics. So Luc, still with yourself, there is a French initiative, a very interesting one around transparency, which is starting to gain traction internationally. It's the Trust ID initiative. Can you let us know in a few words what it is, and if we see adoption on this Trust ID?
The first question was at the beginning. The advertiser says, "Hey, I want to get some reconciliation on my investments because I have some problems. I'm Citroën or Coca-Cola or La Poste, and I want to know where I put €100 in the game, where they go. So you're a sales house, and you have to give me your because it's a law, you know, there's the loi Sapin in France. So you have you have to give me the investment I have on your site." So we were about 6 or 7 sales house, and said, okay, we will give you all the data. And we arrived with all the log data levels. And said, here are the investments you get on my site. And I get some campaigns from Coke, C-O-K-E, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola Inc., etc., etc., etc. Because the naming was so different. We had several advertisers for one brand, Coca-Cola. And said, how is it possible? Well, let's say the answer is simple. Shit in, shit out. So give me the way to organize the way you name your campaigns, and then at the end, we will give you the reconciliation of all your investments. Yes, they said, well, you don't want to promote the transparency. Yes, I have to promote the transparency, but it's on the technical side. On the technical side, if you name correctly your campaigns on the beginning, I will have correctly named all the campaigns at the end on myself. So Trust ID was the organization of, we said in French, nomenclature, the way you name all your campaigns with Coca-Cola, the brand is Coke or some other brands. The campaign is for March promotion or brand, etc., etc., etc. So the beginning of the story was this one. So we had.
And what's the adoption now? Do we see today?
The
is it
adoption
like
was
high
very complicated. So we tried to have from the tech lab, IAB tech lab, the way to organize it. there's a lot of discussions, and maybe we'll have some much more simpler application in France, because there's a field in the RTB 3.0 which is empty. So we'll maybe use this field to pass the ID. This campaign is linked to an ID, and we'll have the description of the ID at the end. So we'll have the reconciliation. It's something very simple. I think we made some tests, and everything seems to be okay on the operational field. So normally we would push the solution by the end of the year.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. So it's something that is completely through OpenRTB field, so something that can really be expanded globally, that can be adopted by the various tech that take an action in the value chain, right? Mm-hmm. That would make your work easier, right, Sam, for the next analysis?
It's a discussion topic that's come up a lot. A unique transaction ID is one of a handful of must-haves, so that you can always match a buy-side to sell-side view of an impression. It's necessary but not sufficient. It's not sufficient because if all the other data fields are still either misclassified or erroneously named or left blank, then you can match an impression but still not have a proper, transparent understanding of what's happened. But it's certainly a really important first step. Really important first step.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Loïc, what's your view on that? You're also operating on the French market, on the publisher side. What are the feedbacks on Trust ID? What do you see as the future for Trust ID?
Sorry, I was mute. Classic one. Sorry. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Standardization is a very good first step for the programmatic market right now. So what we are missing is some standards about the advertiser ID, the trading desk ID, the campaign ID across all the platform, across all the intermediaries. So it's a very, very good step. The truth is that it will be really hard to implement because there are so many stakeholders to make it relevant to integrate within the project, that it will probably take a lot of time to have a complete and clear overview of the market, and still it will be still very incomplete because actually when you talk what Sam was saying before was about the long tail, it will be really hard to track everything around the long tail. So it's a very interesting initiative, and I guess that this is the sense of history, but it's still very hard to implement considering the number of stakeholders.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Now, speaking about a different and more recent initiative, not really from the long tail actually, but coming from Google, which claimed that it was disclosing completely its fees. So what's your view on that? So it's the next question. Céline, can actually the walled garden provide real transparency? Do you think they're telling the whole story? Loïc, since you were speaking, do you have a view on that?
Definitely. Actually, I think that the only fact I read the study and the article on AdExchanger, and the only fact that Google is mentioning the word in average for every numbers mentioned in the study is not satisfying. But it means that the margin are different from one advertiser to another, from one publisher to another. What are the rules? So there are. I mean, this is an incomplete study, but still, this is a good first step. So it's only, I would say, like the very small good first step.
Okay, Cadi, an opinion on this, as you operate as well as a DSP?
Yes, so I mean, I think you know, to the point we made earlier, they're always operating on a percentage of media model for their advertiser and agency partners. That means their objective is always going to be to have the customers spend more, regardless of whether or not that's hitting their advertisers' goals. And it probably, based on what we see, is going to be to spend more through their DSP onto the Google-owned SSP. I know we may come on to talk a bit more about supply path optimization, but there is that sort of misalignment in potentially in objectives, and I think it's a great first step for Google, but it certainly doesn't align with what we at Beeswax experience brands wanting. You know, they do want full transparency. They want to be able to know what their partners are extracting by way of fees, and whether that represents value for them.
Okay, so we'll keep track of what's going on next with those announcements and see what we can extract from it. Thank you, Cadi. Let's go to the next question. So we already tackled the topic of log-level data sharing. My question now is more concrete. Is it a reality that's happening today? Is it something that you, as an advertiser, for instance, are already exploiting? And what are the operational opportunities or challenges in doing this? Carlotta, can you start on this one?
Yes, in Vodafone, we started to talk about using the log-level data, and with some partners, we started to better understand the process from few months ago from now, but at the moment we are not focusing on that because we are finalizing our in-house in Programmatic.
Okay, thank you, Carlotta. Cadi, on your side, so you mentioned that it was something you were already sharing with your advertisers, if I'm not wrong. How do you make it easier for them to actually extract value from that and make it actionable?
Well, I think before we start, just in case there's anyone on the dialed in who's not really sure about this, when we're talking about log level data or log files, what we really mean is a record of the bid request, bid response dynamic, what actually happened on a particular impression. And we do share these with our customers. We believe that because we're giving each of our customers their own DSP and we give them their own bidder, that effectively means it's their data, and so they should have access to the data that pertains to their campaigns. David, exactly to your point, there can be real challenges with this. Even if you're only looking at win logs, so the log files that pertain to the impressions that you've seen a bid request before, you've responded and you've won, that's still potentially millions or even billions of rows of data every day. So that there can be high processing costs for this. So we've invested a lot in making it much easier for brands to access those files, in some cases even hosting them on behalf of the brand and giving them the opportunity just to simply query that. And the reason it's so important is that log level data have so many sort of good use cases. I think I normally think about it in three core areas. Firstly, they're incredibly important for transparency and auditing, right? If you want to access in real time to information about where and when you've bid, so that you can work out and figure out why you're bidding there. And they're really helpful for buyers to understand supply path optimization, so they can understand where the better performing inventory can be found and where they can find it at the best price. The second use case, if that's sort of transparency and auditing, the second piece really for optimization and audiences, log level data provides the information that you need to really be able to customize your bidding in the way that you would need to make your programmatic spending optimized, not necessarily just to the right click-through rate to hit your that sort of goal, but really to optimize to the KPIs which are important to your brand. And that might be offline sales, it might be brand favorability, it might be anything that a marketing team might care about. So that optimization and audience data, you could join the log level data from your delivery to your audience data to start to understand your audiences and build your audiences. You could run analysis or regression on your ready-to-use data set to get a better understanding of how you might optimize more in future. And then the third thing would really be to get better insights into your programmatic activity and beyond. So things like thinking about what are the common media attributes of people who are converting on your campaign, or perhaps what optimization or what additional opportunities might there be to reach your audience, but perhaps you're missing out on because your targeting is too strict. Or perhaps it's about which publishers you would want to have a direct sponsorship or partnership relationship with, if that's where your audience is really spending a lot of their time. So I think for me, log level data is crucial, not only for transparency, but also for optimization, and then for enabling programmatic to be a more influential strategic part of your advertising strategy.
Yeah, interesting. So it's not just for the sake of transparency, but actually to be able to optimize and get more results and more value from your campaigns. Sam, on your side, is it something that you're seeing as well from your customers or advertisers? Do they have all that level of expectation and expertise around log level data?
I'd say practice currently is very variable. It's very mixed. So I completely agree with what Cadi said, that log level data is critical for both auditable transparency and for intelligent analysis and optimization. So it has a twofold benefit. It was noticeable during our study that some of the advertisers, agencies, and publishers that we worked with, some were much quicker at being able to pull log level data and filter it than others. And similarly, it was very noticeable that some of the DSPs and SSPs, it was much easier from some than others to obtain filtered log level data. And that variability, I suspect, is reflected across the whole programmatic ecosystem. I absolutely really do. I do believe that everyone should have rights to log level data. I think that everyone entering into any contract with any part of the supply chain should be insisting on the rights to log level data. They need to be able to insist that the vendor they're working with can filter that log level data. So what I mean by that is, we had challenges, for example, where a publisher had theoretical contractual rights to log level data from an SSP, but the SSP was only able to provide that log level data in one huge data dump, which therefore had all advertisers in it. Whereas for the purposes of our study, we should only be receiving log level data in relation to the advertisers that were taking part. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, that the tech vendor should be able to filter the log level data.
Indeed, huh?
Yeah. There is some debate about what is the usefulness of log level data. Log level data on its own clearly won't solve any problems. Log level data on its own is just a huge amount of data that you need to store somewhere. But once you have it, if you then have the tools to interrogate and analyze that data and amend your buying or selling strategies in response, it then becomes hugely valuable. And I personally would be wary of providers who tell you that you don't need log level data, you can achieve all the same benefits with aggregate data. Fundamentally, our experience is that is just not true.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sam, for the extensive answer. And quickly, Luc, in 1 minute, what's the view on the publisher side about log level data? Do you know what your buyers expect from you? What's your view on that?
Sorry. No, we don't really know what the buyers expect from us. In fact, it's not so easy to define the target they have. It's not so easy to have the same words to speak about targets or media targeting, marketing targeting, or buying, targeting are not the same, of course. So sometimes not so easy to have some talks at the same level, I would say. So log level data is, of course, quite important because, as Cadi said, well, it's our data from most of the case. But I'm not sure that the way to exploit them is something very clear in the heads of most of people. So once again, maybe it's a little bit early to say that we are able to define the value it brings in the chain. So I know at the moment we do not exploit it.
Still early stage, huh?
Oui.
Okay, let's go. Still speaking about more tech topics, let's say. Question number 6, speaking about SPO, supply path optimization. Does that seem compatible with transparency? And how? So maybe Loïc, you can take this question.
Yeah, definitely. I see no incompatibility between SPO and transparency. Actually, this is, in my opinion, 2 different topics. SPO is all about avoiding DSP to receive 10 bids for the same placement and the same audience. So it's about the duplication of the bid. The only thing is about how the DSP are in the process to set up SPO algorithm or SPO agreement. So in my opinion, this is very, I mean, this is the sense of history for DSP to deduplicate the bids, because with the rise of header bidding now, the amount, the infrastructure cost for DSP is very, very high, with a lot of, I would say, useless bid requests. However, now we see more and more kind of SPO agreement between DSP and SSP, and I'm not sure myself about what are these agreements about exactly, because we can use algorithm for SPO, but agreement, what is it about exactly? Is it about the? I would mention Cadi with the alignment between DSP and SSP and advertiser and publisher. Is it only about, I would say, decreasing the deduplication of the bid, or is it also about some kind of a new generation kickbacks that could happen? I mean, our industry is very familiar with these practices. I'm not sure about that, and I would just be very cautious about the process used by DSP to audit all the SSP, and in order to avoid the conflict of interest, especially when it comes to big players in the field.
So as long as it remains for the sake of having balanced auctions and fair auctions, let's say it's sense of history, but if it becomes more to have privilege on a given partner because of financial higher margin or something like that, then it's less fair and it's less transparent, right?
Definitely. This is just the way how the DSP set up the SPO, basically, because
Loïc, I have to disagree with you on this. I'm going so mad. Yeah, because SPO is 100% about transparency, and with the exception, and if the brand is doing it for themselves, the advertiser or the agency, the actual end buyer is doing it, then 100% it's about transparent practice. If, however, it's the DSP doing it on behalf of the buyer without them knowing, based on Sam's report, the fees that the SSPs charge could vary between 6% and 25%. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're a DSP whose parent company also owns an SSP, yep, and you start pointing all of your demand to the bid requests which are coming from that SSP. You're suddenly going to be paying potentially on a $5 bid. You could be paying $1 more than through a different platform, simply because that's the route that the DSP has taken for you. And so I think SPO is a crucial part of transparency, but it's about the buyer setting it up and controlling it themselves,
Yes,
and
definitely.
not the platform doing it for them.
Definitely. Then we totally agree. I mean,
Oh,
but some
okay.
initiatives, some initiative about the SPO are done by DSP themselves. This is what I mean.
Yes.
This is
And
not
then
always led by the buyer, actually.
And Sam, also, do you have a view on that? I mean, are your customers having some specific requests around SPO, how they want to manage that? Is it with full transparency, or do they also expect financial agreements with partners that are not necessarily transparent?
So I think SPO, in the sense of identifying the most efficient path to buy inventory, that is obviously a good thing, and particularly if that's done through smart analysis of Loglevel data, definitely compatible with transparency. SPO, in the sense of vendors biasing one particular supply chain because of offline agreements, that is obviously incompatible with transparency, which I think is the same point that Loïc and Cadi have just agreed on. So I think we're all saying the same thing, which is SPO done intelligently with transparent access to Loglevel data, a very good thing. SPO, where somebody says, I can get you a better route because I've got an offline deal with another part of the chain, that is clearly not a good thing.
Okay, yeah.
Vehement agreement, I think, from all of us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move forward. I think we're running a bit out of time. So that will be as well the last question, and also kind of a conclusion for each of you. I would be interested, no, still not the thank you. Yeah, that's the one. According to you, what are the blockers for a real transparency moving forward? But also, to enlarge the topic, do we actually need full transparency, and do we always need transparency? So please, each of you, if you can answer to this question. Cadi, if you can start.
Sure. I think I would always veer on the side of full transparency. I think if you have the files, it's important, though, to then use them. And so I think there are certainly some brands out there, some advertisers who are really just focused on outcomes. But I think once you're getting it in beyond this, and you want programmatic to achieve something more strategically important for your business as a brand, then absolutely transparency is crucial to that, because along with transparency generally comes a real sense of partnership and alignment. You know that your platform is in it to help you succeed. And that, I think, has to be, as soon as you get beyond just wanting outcomes, you have to insist on full transparency and full alignment with your partners.
Interesting, thanks, Cadi. Carlotta, what's your view, which will be as well the conclusion on this question?
Yeah, I think that we need full transparency, also because otherwise, why so many brand want to in-house their programmatic? So it's one of the key driver for us to take control and to start a real partnership with the SSP and the DSP, and to control the entire chain, also to achieve our goals. So for me, there is just one block at the moment, that is a lack in a relationship and in communication between advertiser, DSP, and SSP. But at the moment, I see that something is getting changed, but there is still a little bit block.
Okay, Loïc, your view as a sell-side publisher stat?
Yeah, it's really hard to say that you don't want transparency in the market. So it's the answer is pretty clear on my side too. Actually, I'm 100% that with the maturity of the market, transparency is coming. Actually, if you look like all the shady network there was in the market 5 or 10 years ago, it's done now. I mean, they are disappearing from the landscape. So I guess that we are going toward in the right direction. However, in my opinion, transparency is all about the power relationships in the market. For example, Google is over dominating the advertising market nowadays. So when a publisher is asking for more transparency for Google, Google do not feel the urge to address this issue. So when the American Justice Department is asking for more transparency to Google, the power balance is slightly different, and Google give another answer to the Justice Department. So in my opinion, this is all about power relationship between all the stakeholders in the market. And in terms of immediate and concrete action that publisher can do in order to get more transparency, and I guess this is the same for advertisers, it's to shift the balance with technological knowledge and tech knowledge. We need more engineers at publisher places. We need more tech resources. We need more data scientists, whether it be internally or through collectives or subcontractors. Programmatic advertising is much more an engineering job than it used to be before. And if you completely rely on programmatic platform to do all the tech stuff, then you are losing the battle for transparency, I guess.
Thanks, Loïc. Luc, your conclusion? I assume you will also agree with what Loïc just said, right?
Yes, you're right. You know us. Yes.
Thank you, Luc.
I would say understanding. We need to understand the way it works. Transparency, I don't know if we need more and more transparency. We need to understand the evolution of our market. So yes, we need to have much more engineers and developers, and we need to understand the way it works. As the SPO can be something good, as Cadi said, let's say, if you don't understand how it works, maybe it's not so good. So you need to understand the way it works and to manage the relationships with your partners, with your technological partners, with Google and the others. Yes, understanding the keyword.
Okay, yeah, so transparency is a good first step, let's say, but it's just kind of a basis to build on, let's say. Huh?
It can be transparent, but yeah, if you don't look, you will never see it transparent. So you have to look. You have to look and to understand, and you will see the transparency coming.
Data, yeah. To finish with this round table, since we're running out of time, Sam, what's your view also at the conclusion?
The key recommendation from our study was the need for industry-wide access, industry-wide collaboration, around data access and data quality. And I still, for the supply chain to be auditable, those two things are fundamental. So data access and data quality. There's an initiative that's been started in the UK to look at both those areas, cross-industry initiative. And it looks like there's strong support from the WFA and from the US as well, from the ANA. But it's clearly going to take some time because you've got to get towards sort of standardized terms and conditions across a number of different tech vendors. And that's the easy part. The more challenging part will be around aligning data definitions and data taxonomies, because that will require platform changes, not just legal changes. So I think there's some way to go, but it certainly feels as though there's momentum in the right direction.
Okay, yeah, good conclusion. Thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks a lot, all. I think we really need to leave you, especially Cadi, who has another panel just right after. Thanks a lot to i5 speaker. Sorry again for the small technical issue I had at the beginning. That's the challenge of being at home, but I think finally we made it. So thanks a lot, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, David.
Attending. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye, guys.